over the past several months, I've spoken with more than 20 AEC firm owners and leaders, architects, interior designers, facade specialists, planning consultants, construction managers from Australia, UK, Canada, and even the US. And here's the thing that I noticed. Not one of them said that their biggest challenge was coordination overhead. Not one of them mentioned that it was fragmented information. Not one of them said that the problem was that data for each project lives in six different places. But when they described their actual day, that's exactly what was happening. So today, I want to show you the pattern I found, a pattern that emerged in almost every single conversation and why it stays hidden even from the people who are living inside the industry. Let me start with a very specific example. When I spoke with a facade drafting specialist in Canada who has been doing this for more than 20 years, runs a small team, and handles complex commercial projects, when I asked him that what's his biggest operational challenge, here's what he said. He said that the biggest problem of any new project is getting all the information you need in one single place. Because architects send PDFs, engineers send Revit models, and one trade marks up drawings by hand, another one might send notes or WhatsApp. Some of it might be in the project management software, while the email thread has an entirely new version. And there's someone in the background who is working off a SketchUp file that does not even match any of the above. He said it takes him about 2 hours to sort through everything and orient himself onto the new job. And if a junior person were to handle it, it would take him almost 2 days to do the same thing. He said on one project, half of the budget just went to sorting and reconciling everything before the actual drafting work even began. Now, here's what struck me. He didn't flag this as his main problem. He said that his main problem was getting all the information. And then he just moved on. Well, he's not wrong, but he's also not seeing what's underneath that answer. What he described, what almost every person I spoke with described in a slightly different language, is what I call the coordination tax. Here's what I mean. Every AEC project generates information from multiple sources simultaneously: architect's drawings, engineering specs, client feedback, site observations, meeting notes, product selections, regulatory requirements, amendment requests. All of it is constantly being updated by different people using different tools, working on different versions of the same files. And the firm's job underneath all the creative and technical work is to reconcile all of that, to figure out which version of a document is correct, to track down a decision that was made in a site meeting about 3 weeks ago, to make sure that the amendment that a client requested via WhatsApp actually made its way into the drawing set, and to confirm what the engineer actually signed off on is still what the architect is showing. This reconciliation work, the chasing, the checking, the consolidating, is what I'm calling the coordination tax. And every project pays it every week. And the problem isn't that any of these tasks is devastating. None of them are. Like 30 minutes to find the right PDF, maybe 20 minutes chasing a WhatsApp confirmation, an hour going through feedbacks from 3 separate channels to build a checklist. Individually, all of these tasks look like small tasks, but they happen constantly. They happen across every project, across every team member, every week of the year. And when you add them up, the answer is simply where most of the week actually goes. Let me give you a few more examples from the conversations that I've had, because I want to show you that this is not just one firm's quirk, this is industry wide. An architectural firm owner in Australia, someone I've spoken with at length about his business, told me that every amendment change on a project creates a downstream cascade. Check the files, reissue the documents, update the records, resend it to relevant parties. He estimated about 30 minutes spent on every amendment note and multiplied it by 10 to 15 concurrent jobs. He said this as a statement of fact, not as a complaint, just this is how it works. An interior designer in Ontario told me that her whole team uses Google Drive because that's the only platform that every trade, every consultant, and every contractor has access to. She said that she loses significant time on what she calls a game of telephone tag. A conversation happens on site, someone remembers it, someone else interprets it, a trade acts on that interpretation, and at the end of the day, what's there on the wall may or may not match what was agreed in the room. She said that she wished someone could just record everything, reconcile it automatically, and put it at a place where everyone could see. She also said that this is just part of the job. I can't really complain. A network of interdisciplinary AEC practices in Australia, around 60 people, was running a proof of concept with an AI tool specifically designed to reduce manual tasks like quality control, scheduling, compliance checking, specifications. The model suggested that it could save about 20 hours per person per week, and the person running this called it an incredible opportunity. When I asked him that where those 20 hours currently go to, it was all coordination work, tracking, checking, reconciling, following up. And here's one more. A renovation firm in New York that's been operating for 32 years told me what the owner described as loose forms and processes spread here and there for 27 of those years before they actually built a coherent system around it. But 27 years running a profitable business, but still bleeding on coordination overhead this whole time too. They just couldn't see it because it was diffuse. So why don't firms name this as the problem? Well, a few reasons. First, the overhead is diffuse. No single moment looks catastrophic. You are not losing a project to one bad decision. You are losing hours across hundreds of microtransactions. That makes it very hard to see them on any given day. Second, firms attribute the slowness to things that feel more like external reality. They say projects are complex, clients change their minds, regulations are unpredictable, planning is bureaucratic. These things are all true, but they are not the cause of the coordination tax. They are what makes the coordination tax even worse. Lastly, and this is the one I find most interesting, the work that generates the overhead looks like real work. You are not sitting still when you are chasing down a file version. You are working, answering emails, making calls, managing documents. It's only when you track where the hours actually went that you realize how much of it was coordination rather than output. The planning consultant I spoke with told me that 50% of his job is chasing counsels for information. He said it with a kind of resigned expertise, like someone who has mapped the terrain of inefficiency and accepted it. And he's right that some of that is genuinely external, but the underlying dynamic that a significant portion of professional time goes to chasing and reconciling information rather than applying expertise is exactly the pattern that I'm describing. Here's where it gets more serious. The natural response to feeling overloaded is to hire people, more hands to handle the volume. But if the information architecture is fragmented, if the underlying system is the problem, then every new person you hire inherits the same fragmented system. They just pay the coordination tax from a different seat. An architect building a digital construction firm in the US said it clearly. The more his team grew, the more he found himself in a never ending game of hiring and having more work to do and hiring again. He wasn't wrong, but the reason is that the system creates its own overhead at every level of scale. And here's what makes it worse in the current moment. A lot of firms are now exploring AI to help with exactly these manual coordination tasks. But several people that I spoke with found something sobering. AI requires clean, consistent, well organized information to work reliably. A senior architect in Canada discovered that when she handed an AI tool a thermal bridge calculations without giving it precise parameters, it gave her a beautifully formatted result that was factually wrong, and only her expertise allowed her to catch it. She said, I can only give this to someone who is already expert enough to check it, which means if your information is fragmented, AI inherits the fragmentation. You don't get the upside, you just get a faster version of the same unreliable output. So, here's what I want to leave you with. If your firm is slower than it should be, and if you have been attributing that to project complexity, client indecision, regulatory burden, or not having the right talent, it might be worth sitting with a different question for a moment. What if the actual bottleneck isn't any of those things? What if it's the fact that information for every project lives in multiple places simultaneously, and your team spends a measurable portion of every week reconciling those fragments? Because the solution to project complexity is expertise. The solution to regulatory burden is knowledge. The solution to client indecision is process. But the solution to fragmented information is architecture. How information is structured, centralized, and made accessible across every role, every tool, and every stage of a project. And that is a solvable problem. It's not a fact of life, it's a design decision. And firms that made this decision, and I spoke with a few who had, describe what happens afterward in a very particular way. They say their team is actually doing the work now instead of managing the information around the work. They say projects move differently. They say they don't have to explain the same thing to three different people who are working from three different versions. That's not a small thing. That's the operating leverage that most AEC firms are currently leaving on the table. If this pattern sounds familiar, if you recognize it in how your firm operates, I would genuinely love to hear from you. What's your version of this problem? Where does the coordination tax show up in your work? Drop it in the comments. Or if you are working on solving it, reach out directly. This is exactly the kind of problem that my team works on with firms. And if you want to go deeper on the operational side of running an AEC firm, the link of a strategy session is in the description. We can map out where the overhead is actually coming from in your firm and what it would take to fix it. I'll see you in the next one.